plenary discussion, The Enlightenment by Ritchie Robertson. Where does research come from? The second topic I want to discuss is the emergence of research. We take it for granted today. Everybody's trying to create knowledge, but knowledge creation is a fairly new thing. It's been around in the past in civilizations, Persia, Phoenicia, China, Greece, Rome, all that. But then we had a dark age, and then we had an emergence, re-emergence, and a re-emergence with a vengeance. We had knowledge creation, wealth creation, freedom creation, which are all the same thing. I've discussed this many times in this podcast. But we had all of these things kicking off sort of in the mid-17th century and then really accelerating on steroids. And here we are today. And the question that Ritchie is not very well answering, to be honest, is, well, how did it actually happen? We have the establishment of research universities, which is just a logical function of the Enlightenment. They all got established sort of 16-something and then going forward. Now, we had institutions before that, of course, in England and Europe, and maybe in order to understand the situation, we need to discuss humanism, clergy, and then the sort of that step towards research. It's not as easy as you might think, because let's say if we have the University of Basel, the first humanistic university founded in Europe, as far as I know, that was pretty much a sort of a theological situation. You studied scripture and you studied the divine. The university where I graduated, my undergrad, Zurich, still calls you a graduate of the theological faculty when you graduate, not the Polytech, but the university. So there's still these old established institutions are still prevalent, and there's a fundamental difference. Take Zurich. Okay, we have the University of Zurich, which has been around for a long time, and then we have the Polytech in Zurich, which was founded in the 19th century. Clearly, there's something going on there. I want to talk about this. This is Nothing Wrong podcast. It's July 28th, 2023. This is Krim Telco. It's the second episode today, so we're still up 130% for the year. Market's up 20.2. We're outperforming by 109.8%. So where does research come from? How did that thing happen? Okay, I discussed the first preliminary discussion of the Enlightenment of the book is the point that I'm making is that the change from the authority to decide what is and what isn't, right? So we have a shift away from the clergy and the political powers, who weren't just powerful in a today's sense, like they had the power of taxation or incarceration. They also had the power to decide what is and what isn't. They decided what books should be read. They decided actually what's to be known. Famously the Galileo with the world going around the sun and all that stuff. Not going around the sun. So the authority was not just in today's sense. The state wasn't just in charge of, again, taxing and stuff. It was in charge of knowing. Just as a side note, of course, we almost slipped back into this disaster during the COVID times, when knowledge also, or at least there were powers, still are, but not as strong, fortunately, anymore. People like Anthony Fauci that literally wanted to monopolize knowledge and decide not just what to do and but also what is and what isn't. Like you had to, if you were disagreeing with the party line on the science, then you were chastised. So that's exactly what the Enlightenment was able to undo. We obviously always fall back into this trap, but that's for another discussion. So I want to discuss the book and where does research come from. Actually, Patterson talks in the book at some point. He mentions the establishment of research universities, which is very interesting. He just mentions it, but why did people come up with that? Like everything in nature, there's no design, right? It's not like God designed us to do research. We came up with that idea. And oh gosh, are we good at it now? And oh gosh, has it done well for us in terms of wealth creation, in terms of freedom creation, in terms of increasing happiness, all of that stuff. So where does it come from? That's the question. And I don't have a good answer to that. The economic answer, of course, is competition. It's a sort of a rat race. Once you start doing research, I have to, because otherwise you'll be better in war. There's certainly a lot of anecdotal evidence of, I love the example of the Vikings who figured out a way to navigate the sun even in clouded skies by using some sort of stone that had some sort of quantum mechanic radiation. Of course, they had no idea what's going on, but they could use that particular property of that, whatever it is, crystal, to navigate in obviously clouded skies, which in the northern part of Europe certainly is often the case. And that gave them an edge, and that's why they become a seafaring nation. Not because they were good at rowing, or even not because they were good at fighting wars. It's because they figured out they had technology. And the story goes on and on. World War II is a sad example of how technology and know-how can decide a war. Sad in the sense that we had to use nuclear power on many people to finish it. But from a scientific perspective, of course, it's at least, let's say, an interesting experiment. Gunpowder, all kinds of stuff. Sailing against the wind allows the Dutch and then later on everybody in Europe to discover the world and eventually colonize the world. So it's always technology. It's technology. So that's a good reason to do research. And maybe the explanation is just simply, look, if nobody does research, like if we all sit in our universities and read scripture in Greek and Latin, well then it's fun. And we can, play collegiate games, read Greek and Latin and golf and play golf, and that's it. But if we start doing research, we're actually in this situation right now in the United States, where a lot of the East Coast and some of the West Coast also, unfortunately, establishment actually really has become sort of a country club, the academic establishment, a country club where rich kids go, play a little bit of golf, study a little bit of Latin, and that's it. And then we have China and India with all these people actually doing research. And guess what? They're getting jobs, they're getting promotions, because it's not because we like them, it's because we need them, right? So that's one explanation, but I want to dig a little bit deeper. I think Ritchie Robertson's book is not just about economics, it's not just about game theory and those sort of things, and maybe we can reduce the world into that, but I want to go a little bit deeper. I want to think more along the lines of my first preliminary discussion, which is when I said, okay, once we delegate from who decides what is and what isn't to the human, away from authority, is there a direct relationship with research there? Well, one is, I mentioned already, yes. I mean, if you want the human to make decisions, you need to understand the human. So psychological, medical, political research is important. That's why we had this huge breakthroughs also in political knowledge and the creation of the United States and the first democratic state in the world, and the beginning of freedom, political freedom, the beginning of wealth creation. All of these things coincided. Now, is there a direct relationship between freedom and research? I would say yes, because if you free people from constraints, right? If you tell people you can do whatever you want to do, so take a child. I mean, this is also David Deutsch, right? If you take children seriously, if you just let them go, if you let kids do whatever they want, chances are at some point they will stop playing video games. They will stop watching, boys will stop watching girls and so on, and vice versa. And they will actually start doing research. There's a good chance if you put a bunch of kids in the jungle, you give them everything, video games, whatever they're wasting their time with today, chances are that they actually, they will start doing research. So it's a natural curiosity that is fed with feedback. That's the main thing. Also, you get feedback, right? I mean, this is what video games are all about. Like, you do something, you solve puzzles, and then you have feedback. So with research, it's kind of like that. You know, the difference between classical education, so you know, those country clubs I mentioned with, I don't know, reading Greek poetry, nothing wrong with that per se. But if that's all you do, where's your checks and balance? What are you cross-checking against? Doing research is you're cross-checking against Mother Nature, against the arbiter. This is also David Deutsch. The ultimate arbiter is physics. The ultimate arbiter is nature. So if you do research, so I would say my conjecture here is that, yes, it's obviously important to do research in order to win war games, but it's also something innate in humans. Curiosity is innate in humans. It's something we actually like to do. We like to understand our condition. We like to understand things like medical issues, but it's not just to help us. Of course, that's part of it, but it's really also because we just want to know. I really believe, I can't prove it right now, but it's a thought I want to continue, that actually research comes from an innate human desire. So it's like sex. It's like that. Research is like hunger or sex. We don't have to teach ourselves to do research. In fact, we have to prevent ourselves from doing research, which is what the church and the authorities have been doing for centuries during the Middle Ages. But if we let things free, then research comes naturally. Research is something that comes from an innate desire to learn and to be checked against nature. This is my conjecture and part of the preliminary discussion to Ritchie Robertson, the Enlightenment. So the summary, where does research comes from? It comes from an innate desire of humans to do research. So once we let humans decide, they will start doing research.